Right now, there is a war on savers. What's a war on savers? A time when there's low interest to be had at the bank, but high inflation. How do you know whether or not you're a saver? Well, if you happily drive 10-year-old cars. If you've ever mowed your own lawn rather than paying somebody else to mow. If you wash plastic utensils so you can reuse them. Or if you've changed banks to get a better rate on a CD, well then you're a saver and I congratulate you for that. The problem though is right now we're in an environment where inflation is very high and the amount of interest to be earned in bank accounts, money markets and CDs is practically zero. So you're in a situation where your money is purchasing less and less and less for you every month, and that's not going to change anytime soon. Make no mistake, this is a war on savers. So if you're in a situation where interest rates at the bank are 0.1, 0.15, 0.2% if you're lucky, let inflation is 4, 5, 6, 7%, and in the area of gasoline and lumber and housing prices, we're well into the double digits of inflation, even over 100% inflation on some of those items. Well, you can see that your interest at the bank is not keeping up so that your purchasing power remains level. The war on savers is eroding your purchasing power over time. Now, one of the reasons why this happens, a lot of folks remember back in the late 70s how high interest rates were, and they think if they just hold on for another month in this money market account earning them 0.001%, that next month interest rates will be high and they would be rewarded for having waited. They don't want to tie it up at 0.15% in a CD. But I've got some bad news for you. Interest rates are not going back up to the high levels that they were in the late 70s. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one is supply and demand. Back in the 70s, we had all of the baby boomers who were looking to borrow money to buy their houses, to buy their cars, and to finance their businesses. Now the baby boomers are full grown and most of them are retired, and now instead of looking to borrow money, they're looking to save money in something safe. And there just isn't a large enough percentage of young people beneath them who are creditworthy to drive the demand of that up. So interest rates are not jumping up anytime soon. Now, the government doesn't mind high inflation either. You might think that they do, but they don't. And young people, they don't mind high inflation either because, well, they don't have any money to begin with and they just see that they're going to be getting paid so much more through work and they're happy for that. Now, a moment ago, I said the government doesn't mind inflation, and you might think, well, why is that, Matt? And the reason is the government is rewarded for creating high inflation two ways. First, it's a lot easier for them to repay any of their debts. So rather than repaying back what was amount of money that, let's say, could purchase a Cadillac, now they're repaying an amount of money that would purchase a Yugo because of inflation. It might be the same dollar amount that they have to pay back, but the economic value of what they're having to pay back is a lot less, and that's rewarding the government for bad behavior. Another big way that the government is rewarded for creating inflation is it actually increases tax revenue, not just income tax and payroll tax, but it actually dramatically increases the amount of capital gains tax that the government receives. Think about it like this. We've got a lot of beautiful mountain ground around in Pennsylvania where I'm located. Let's say you buy 100 acres of mountain ground, and let's just use the round number of $100,000. You don't improve the land, you don't timber the land, you just camp on it and enjoy it. 10 years later, when you sell the land, because of inflation, you sell it for $200,000. It's not that the land is any bigger or that the timber is any more valuable or anything like that. It's just that inflation has driven land prices up. Well, you would actually then owe the federal government $20,000 in capital gains tax. Not because your property grew in size, your 100 acres is still 100 acres, but because the value of it appreciated, they get 20% of that appreciation. Overall, they're getting 10% of your property because they caused inflation. Does that make you mad? Makes me a little mad to think about that. So what do you do to win the war on savers? So I have a couple of solutions here for you on what you can do to win the war on savers. You want to get the most interest you can safely. And there's two different ways you can do this. There's a conservative way and there's a moderate way. The conservative way is don't just look at CDs, also look at fixed annuities. A fixed annuity is simply a CD, but instead of being through a bank, it's through an insurance company. The insurance company backs it up with their own cash reserve, and the account is reinsured with a government agency as well, just like CDs are reinsured with a government agency as well. Now with a fixed annuity, you can actually get 3% as of the recording of this video on a fixed annuity. Now you might say, well, 3%, that's not that great, Matt. And I agree, but think about it like this. When I was looking at bank rates this morning, I was seeing that a 5-year CD was 0.15%. 0.15% for 5 years. Well, if you get that to 3%, that means you're actually getting 20 times the interest. You're getting 20 years worth of interest in 1 year. So why not? Why not get the higher interest that's available to you to stave off the effects of inflation as much as possible? I have to be frank with you, inflation has been greater than 3% and will probably continue to be greater than 3%. So you really want to be up in the 5, 7, 10% plus range in terms of returns in order to keep pace with inflation now. So how do you do that without taking risk? Well, you look to the moderate family of investments. These are investments where your principal is guaranteed and reinsured. It's literally safe. There is no risk of loss with these types of investments. The only uncertainty is how much you'll make. They tell you at the end of the year how much they're going to pay you for the previous year, not at the beginning of the year how much they're going to pay you over the next year. It works like this. You pick a stock market index like the S&P 500. If that index goes up, they credit you a fair amount of interest. If that index goes down, your account stays level. Not a penny's worth of loss to either your principal, that's the money you started with, or the interest that you've made over the previous years. As soon as that interest is credited, it gets locked in so it can't be lost. These types of accounts can make 5, 7, 10% or more in a good market, and they won't lose anything in a bad market. This will give you the opportunity to equal, if not beat, inflation. So how do you win the war on savers? You need to really double down on educating yourself and getting clarity on some of these, well, unusual options. Things that maybe you weren't aware of previously, like fixed annuities, stock market certificates of deposit, equity-linked notes, or equity-indexed annuities. These are the ways that you're able to beat inflation and win the war on savers.